Evolution U Control UC16. It's not always easy to configure a MIDI controller to work with Ableton. The good news is that it's usually possible to get most MIDI controllers to work eventually, following some logical steps. I managed to get an old Evolution U Control UC16 MIDI controller that I found in a drawer working. It hadn't been powered up for at least 5 years. Step 1. Load up Ableton. In this example, I'm using Ableton 11, but the process should be similar if you are using a different version. You don't need to install any drivers for the UC16, despite what the instructions tell you. Step 2. Click on the Options tab along the top, and in the menu that opens, click on Preferences at the bottom. Step 3. In the Preferences box that opens up, select the Link Tempo MIDI tab. Under the MIDI section, there are 3 columns. These are Control Surface, Input and Output. Assuming you haven't set anything up here before, these will all be blank. However, in my example, I've previously set up the M-Audio Oxygen 8 V2 MIDI controller keyboard. This is configured on line 1, so I'm going to use line 2, but if you've nothing previously set up, you can use line 1. All 3 boxes on line 2 are pre-selected with none. Click on the down arrow in the Control Surface box and a list of devices opens up. Select the device you want. Here I'm looking for the UC16, however, it doesn't appear on the list, so I've selected UC33E, as that's the nearest device. On the next box along, which is Input, click on the down arrow and a smaller list of devices opens up. In my example, I've got UMC204HD 192K MIDI in, which is my sound interface. USB Oxygen 8 V2, which is my MIDI controller keyboard, and UC16 USB MIDI controller, which is the device we've just plugged in. Interestingly, it detected the exact device. If you haven't installed anything yet, you will just have the one choice. So just select UC16 USB MIDI controller. Do the same on the next box along, which is Output. Step 4. Under this section, there will now be a list of MIDI ports, with inputs and outputs. You are looking for, in, UC33E input, UC16 USB MIDI controller. There are 4 boxes after this. These are, Track Sync Remote and MPE. I won't go into the details of these here, but you have to click on the remote box. This will then change to orange and have a tick in it. You can then close up the Preferences box by clicking on the red cross in the top right-hand corner. Step 5. You now have to set up the UC16 to operate a device. In this example, I'm using one of my favorite synthesizers. This is the Native Instruments Massive X. The setup is pretty similar for other things though. Select Massive X on a MIDI track and the front panel will open up. To make it easier to see what you are doing, you can click on the red cross in the top right-hand corner to close the panel up. Step 6. In the device title bar of the Massive X, click on the down arrow, just to the right of the orange circle. This opens up the 16 macros that we are going to configure for the 16 controllers on the UC16, as none of them will do anything until they are set up. Click on the MIDI button on Ableton. It's in the top right corner, just left of the percentage CPU indicator. This will then turn blue along with other parameters that can be set up for the Evolution UC16 to operate. In the Massive X box, you'll see the 16 macro controls all blue. Click on the 01 box and an arrow will appear in the middle of it. Now turn the assignable controller 1 on the UC16 and you'll see the box corners appear along with 1116. This is the number of the MIDI controller. It may well be something different from yours, but don't worry. It all depends on how the UC16 was last configured. The main thing is that a number appears. Next, click on the 02 box and turn the assignable controller 2 on the UC16 and the same thing will happen. You should click on all 16 on the macros and set up all 16 assignable controllers. You'll see a list of MIDI mappings being compiled in a list on the top left of the screen. Click on the blue MIDI box. Now all the programming has been done. Step 7. Now the exciting bit. If you turn any of the assignable controllers on the UC16, you'll see the arrow going left or right as you turn the corresponding knob. Click on the spanner icon to open the Massive X control panel up, and you'll see the macro controls in a line along the top. These will now visually alter as you move the UC16 knobs. By default, Massive X only has the first 8 set up, but as we've already set the full 16 up, all you have to do is click on the 9. You'll then see in red the Massive X controls that are already assigned to macros. Click on one that's not assigned. Here I'm clicking on Pulse Modulation 1. You'll see the number 9 move with the mouse till you click on the control. The PM 1-inch button now has a red 9 on it, and the 9th control has now turned from grayed out to red with PM under the control. Turning the UC16 knob 9 will now control the previously unused 9th macro. You can just as easily set up the others so you've got the full 16 all assigned. How to get other devices set up? The process can vary slightly depending on the device. Using one of the excellent Arturia collections, I've opened up the Arturia CZV. If you click on the down-pointing arrow in the device title bar, there are no plugin parameters as there were with the native instruments Massive X. In this case, you click on the Configure button, which turns green. Then click on the control you want the MIDI controller to alter. In this case, I'm clicking on the timbre slider. This then shows up as Macro 1. Click on any of the other controls you want, and these get populated in the Configure box. They also get labeled, so for instance, op gate length appears. Next, click on the MIDI box and it will change to blue. Next, click on the blue boxes that you just created and turn the assignable controller you want. Click on the others in turn, and when you've finished, click the MIDI button again to turn off the blue, back to gray. The UC16 will now control the Arturia CZV controls that you have assigned, and you'll see them move on screen.